Thank you for joining this session. We're going to talk today about values, and it's great to have so many board members, and also Tom Bacon from our Future Leaders Network is joining us. Welcome. And Betty, wonderful to see you again, and Ian as well. So great to have you all here. I know we were expecting a few more people who haven't necessarily been through the process, but what I said to Alice was it'd be worth just us having this call, reflecting perhaps even as individuals, as MIA members, for those of us who are here in our, away from having gone through this process. And Ian, of course, you will have seen this announcement about the MIA values. And what I thought we'd do is I'll just quickly share what those values are, maybe give you a bit of background about the process that we went through, and then we'd really welcome your feedback, and Betty as well. I mean, it was great to be able to sit down with Betty and Joe at NAM and talk about the process and the values and where we're going next with them, and maybe that's something more we can discuss as well. So if that's okay. So we launched the values in the week of NAM, and we've got 7 values at the moment. And I think the first thing to say about these values is they're very much coming from not the MIA as the board, but the people who are on the board and also the future leaders. So people who are in the industry, who care very much about this industry. And we see these values as being inspirational and visionary and something to aspire for. And they're very much not a rule book. In fact, this whole conversation started out of a code of conduct discussion that we had at the board and looking at other code. And no, this was not what we wanted. We didn't want to go down this route. We wanted to have something that was more positive and engaging, and really try to get our leaders and our young people in our industry looking 5-10 years ahead about the things that we need to be thinking about. So the first, I'm going to read them all out to you. So inspire current and future music creators and learners, nurturing them through their lifetime. Transform our businesses towards a commercially viable and sustainable future. Foster a culture of innovation and creativity across every aspect of our businesses. Embrace the opportunity to be reflective and representative of our diverse community. Provide flexible and inclusive workspaces for our people that encourage them to learn and develop and support their physical health and mental well-being. Proactively engage with and serve our broad music community. And finally, contribute to the economic and social well-being of the local communities within which we operate. And as I read those back, I think that's amazing, actually. I think those are amazing words, and they're not all quite right. We haven't quite all got the right words in the right places, as always with these things. And this is very much the start of a journey. But I think that's a year's work at the board and the future leaders to sit down and really think carefully about where those values should go. So I'm interested, Ian, I'm going to pick on you because unfortunately everyone else is involved in the process, but I always value very much your thoughts. And first I want to know what the weather like is in Northern Ireland this morning. Is it raining? Please tell me there's some sun in Northern Ireland.
It's overcast.
Overcast. Okay. Yeah. Well, it's improved on last week. So
yes, last week it was raining. Yeah.
But you're a highly experienced individual of this sector. What was your kind of first reaction or feeling when you read about these values?
Yeah, I mean, the values in themselves, I think, are great. I think the statements are good. I guess the question is what goes alongside them, I've been involved in lots of organizations that have, can craft great words and great copyright. And then it's kind of, okay, where's the substance, behind it? So the aspirations, I think, are great. I agree with them all, actually. And I'd love to just see, okay, given that's the umbrella, if you like, or the vision and the goals of the organization, what's next? Where's the operating plan to actually kind of, and I guess I'm probably one of very few, if not the only non-board member here today. And is that a reflection of how much the rest of the organization really cares? So, and, it's taken you guys a year to get to this point, and it'll probably take you another 5 to get the people in the organization to even realize, you'll have people coming to you in about 2 years' time saying, I didn't even know values existed, so how are you going to communicate that message and create the interest, at least, for people to want to be involved in the next steps?
Yeah, I think those are all great points, Ian. Do any of my colleagues who were involved in this process, particularly board members and Tom, maybe you want to offer some response to Ian there, some thoughts on his comments? Come on,
I've got some feedback here. I mean, it's not immediate. It's not about actions being taken. It's more about supporting of the values, because I've been out and about talking to people about this, and I had a terrific day, and I'm allowed to talk openly about it because they've given me their blessing. But I mean, PMT, oddly enough, have been working on a similar project and have come up with almost identical values, and their private equity partners, who they invest in more traditional retail, invest in ethical businesses and so on, and they want to align with us. They want to show very vocal and very public support for it and move forward, and they want to show as well things like sustainability. They want to show examples moving forward with us. They want to do it hand in hand, show that they're aligning with similar companies, similar values actually within the industry. And there was also our parent company, Midwich, who actually, although we are their kind of MI arm, they do a little bit of MI with other brands that we don't associate with and all the rest. It's the value bit that's got them interested, and they're looking at it separately, and they're all asking, well, those 2 companies alone, and that's only in the last 2 weeks, are saying they want to create actions that we can then go out there and publicly advertise and talk about and then build on. And I know Stephen, with Warwick Music and some of the sustainability stuff he's got there, we can talk about this. So there are actions in play, and there are things I think we can work with people on to create actions going forward to get attention, because you're right, we're going to have to shout about this, but it's not just good enough to talk about it. We're going to have to put something concrete out there to show that we're acting on it, that we're behaving in that manner, and we're living and breathing these values, because it doesn't mean anything if we don't. And that's just a very brief, I mean, that's literally what I've experienced in the last 2 weeks. So doesn't answer your question fully, but it was reassuring to me to have these conversations, because I really thought there'd be a lot of pushback or just no interest. And they're not. People are willing to get involved, and companies of a certain size, particularly with new leadership in them, are keen to show that, that they're doing things to head in that direction, directions of diversity, directions of mental health, directions of sustainability, and then create actions that we're going to be able to share and hopefully build on, and, and show that we are trying to do this. Yeah.
Thanks, Greg. I think the other thing, Ian, I would say, and it's great to have you involved in this conversation. I really appreciate you joining today, because the view that we've taken is that, and I explained this to Betty when we met at NAM, was we're going to kind of just, there is a plan, by the way, underneath this, and we'll talk about that. We'll pick on one of the values and talk you through some of the thinking, so that you can see that there is more meat on the bone, so to speak. But one of the things that we wanted to do was just give time for this to sit in, try and let people just read the values, and do they align? Do they align with my thinking from my business perspective? Can I see that there's things in here that I should be thinking about, maybe slightly further down the line, and give the industry time to come back and say, you know what, no, this is wrong. This isn't the right direction, or we don't want to be going in this way, or we don't agree with this. I think to Greg's point, so far we're not hearing a big pushback on the values themselves. I think what you've identified incorrectly is, how are we now going to engage the industry from top to bottom with moving forward? And that is very much going to have to come from the content that we provide, and the case studies and the examples that we set out to members, to show that this is why. Look at this great work that these organisations are doing, who are really adapting these values. So
Yeah, I think it's great if you can shout about, you know, a major retailer or a major manufacturer or whatever, you know, implementing one or all of the values or some of them, and then you can, you know, you can do case studies, etc., on those companies and how they have practically, you know, implemented some of that. And I think even, you know, on simple things like packaging, I mean, the laws are about to change in Germany next year. You know,
yeah,
you can't use sellotape anymore. You can't use, you know, a lot of the stuff that goes around the guitars, the foam type sort of packaging, all that kind of stuff. That's all got to change now. So, you know, things like that and sustainability and recycling and things are important for even manufacturers to know that, hey, these things are coming, these things are happening. You need to be acting now to deal with them. So.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think what's really interesting with sustainability is as one of the things, and when we talked about that value in particular, Jamie, it's great to see you, by the way. Thanks for joining.
I'm like,
No problem. Feel free to chip in whenever. On the sustainability piece, we had a great conversation about that in our group, particularly around obviously COP and the target of net zero, and you know, but what we really wanted to get to, and there was a fantastic debate that went on in the room later, where you know you heard both sides of the debate. You heard the side that says, look, this is really important, the planet's falling apart, we need to do this, and then the other side was, I haven't had a single person walk into my store asking for a carbon neutral guitar, you know, and that's the reality, right? That is the truth. So, but of course, notwithstanding those two sides of the debate, what we wanted to do was frame that in a value, which is very much around, this is about commercial viability. This is about, it's going to happen. It is coming. You can either sustainability will either be done to you through the, like you've identified, the lucid regs, or you know, the packaging regs, or even the plastic packaging tax, or the right to repair rules. You know, all of these things are going to happen, and we need to move forward to make our businesses commercially viable and protected, and then the impact for sustainability will come through as well. So it's kind of taking that middle view. You know, we're not just going to go out there and hammer that we need to do this for the benefit of the planet, because in reality, I think in our space, that would be a hard argument to win. I think people would be a bit ambivalent to that argument. And you could argue even that society themselves has been a bit ambivalent to that argument. What's driving the change is when it's much more commercially sensible and it works for our businesses individually. Jamie, it's great to have you here. I've got, you know, a load of we've got a load of board members and Tom Bacon from the Future Leaders Network here. So just wanted to get your thoughts on the value statements that you read.
I've got to be honest, I haven't read the value statements. Were they emailed to me?
Sorry, they're on the website. But I'll tell you what. So if we talked about, so the things that we're talking about is inspiring and creating new future leaders, making our businesses commercially viable and sustainable, innovation, creativity, providing flexible and inclusive workspaces for our people. It was really about setting a vision for our industry 5 to 10 years out, you know, aspirational, inspirational, positive, forward-looking, I suppose, rather than the doom and gloom of that we've maybe had in the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think sustainability is a topic that's going to become more to the fore with people, and I think we need a plan, because I think although customers may not be asking for it now, I think, you know, in 10 years' time they'll be expecting it, and what we don't want to be doing is being on the back foot, especially, you know, when things like CITES sort of like just snuck up on us, you know, and we got taken very much by surprise as far as that one was concerned. And obviously with the changes with nickel and stuff like that that's coming down the line, you know, we need to be sort of like, you know, proactive on those rather than reactive, I think.
I think that was very much on our minds when we started formulating this, Jeremy. Yeah.
Will, great to see you. How are you?
Fine. I've got
Sorry, was that? Oh, that's Jamie. Will, you're on mute, my friend. Did you have a chance to read through the values? What were your thoughts or feelings on a values-driven approach to the future of our industry?
I must apologise, not as comprehensively as I probably ought to have done, but so I'm slightly in lurking mode. I've got plenty on at the weekend, so I'm running around preparing for it. So apologies, but I'm happy to lurk and contribute. I was interested to pick up on what you said. You were just what I caught you saying about brass, nickel, silver. Absolutely, be interested to hear what Stephen's up to as well, because it's it's a major metal industry issue, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think going to that point around sustainability from a commercial viability point of view, as we all, those of us who source nickel in our businesses know that most of the nickel has gone into the automotive industry, so there ain't much nickel around, and it is very, very expensive. So of course that reality is probably not going to change much. So there is going to be forced change, not just from legislation, but also from the fact that the commercial dynamics have changed substantially. So, and obviously at the end of the day, the music industry is a very, very small industry. Automotive, $2.7 trillion. What's the music industry, as they say? I think the latest figures from Music Trade is 17 billion or something. So much harder for us to compete in those procurement channels. So, anyone else from the board want to chip in around the process itself, just to give some insight to Jamie, Will, and Ian in particular around how we went through that process, how we found that process, before we maybe dive into one of the values and look at the bit more depth to give Ian a bit more reassurance that there's more to this than just what's. Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, no, it's great to see everybody on the call. I think just from my point of view, I thought the whole exercise was really interesting, because I think you can look at it now and be like, okay, we spent a year coming up with this list of values, but I think understanding why that happened and what the steps were, I think when we first got together and this conversation was emerging, it was looking at what can we really do as an industry body to help secure the future of this industry, an industry that we all love deeply and are very passionate about, but is facing some serious threats in terms of commercial viability, in terms of future generations, and how do we ensure that the industry stays relevant and is that kind of creative, interesting, emerging industry going forwards. And so I think a lot of these values have stemmed from those sorts of conversations about the longevity and future of the industry, attracting new people, encouraging more people to play and participate in music, and sort of living up to the vision and the mission. But it was always looked at being more action driven, because we all know from the day-to-day that it's difficult to really make sense of just a list of values and how they can be applied, whether that's in a company or whether it's coming from a trade body. So I think a big part of the process was for it to not to be a list of thou shall do this and thou shall not do that, but kind of values that we can aspire to, and then backed up by, as we've said, real case studies, not just from the big companies, which it's great to hear that people like PMT and Midwich and many others are very supportive of this, but also smaller companies, one-man bands, so to speak, in terms of the operation, because we really truly feel that there's parts of this that are applicable to everyone. And I think it's going to be, as Stephen said, it's not just a single communication, it's going to be an ongoing journey. And I think the participation of everyone within it is going to help build that story as we go along. But I think what you're going to start to see now, and probably what Stephen's going to go into, is each one of those values, as it was discussed in the context of, how it can be spoken about, how it can be broken down, useful resources, potential case studies, ways to kind of help participate and see how it can be applied. So I think it's a really useful piece of work, and I hope it's something that as word starts to spread, people feel that it's something that everyone can get involved with, and useful, actionable information, rather than just preaching about different things, but really kind of actionable. And that's very much the premise that this was made on.
Apologies if I'm going to repeat something that may have been said already, but the sense is looking at the values now, they're from us outwards to our customer base, suppliers, whatever. I'm thinking in my head also with the manufacturer hat on, does the values inwards, coming into us, the valuing of us as an industry and what we do, given what Sarah was saying about sizes of companies, we're sort of in the middle. We're, unlike many other instrument makers, we're small in terms of numbers of staff, major in terms of our position in the industry as one of relatively few overmakers, instrument makers around the world. And I know of another who are no bigger than us, probably slightly smaller actually, who are one of the top end makers in their field, and they're struggling to recruit people to do the work of making key bits, making mechanisms that it'll atrophy from the bottom upwards if you're not careful. Well, valuing the music, but if you ain't got the football to play with, if you haven't got the instrument to play on, you're a bit stuck. Or you go electronic. So I would add it. I think there's an added aspect of the industry being valued such that people want to come into it, and particularly on the technical side. Well,
William, you couldn't have picked a better topic for us to delve into, because I'm going to pick on Alice and Tom. And what I would like to look at is one of the values, because I think recruiting and retaining the amazing people we have in our industry is absolutely at the forefront of one of the challenges that we have and one of the opportunities we have as an industry. In the first session, the team created a value called provide flexible and inclusive workspaces for our people that encourage them to learn and develop and support their physical health and mental well-being, which I think is very much around to your point of how do we behave in a way as an industry that's attractive to get young people particularly in, and then keep these amazing young people, nurture them and sustain them through so they don't leave. So maybe Tom, I mean, there's this great Alice, you might have the one pager for that value that you could talk through with Tom. Would you be willing to do that? Talk about the short form text and especially what Manon was talking about as well.
Yeah, I'll have to dig out the document, but I think what we were focusing on was Manon came up with a really nice little catchphrase, which was, what is your superpower? And it's all about like getting to know your team and finding out what they're good at to lead to just a more successful group of people. And obviously the Future Leaders Network is quite pivotal to this bit of work, because what we've come up with is basically a schedule of meetings, events, training, and even mentorship that's going to appeal to people at all levels and across all areas of the sector. So we identified a bit of a challenge with sort of succession planning and keeping people in the industry. And I think the values work is kind of pivotal to that, because the next generation want to work in an industry that's inclusive, that cares about sustainability. So yeah, Tom, I don't know if you want to develop on that at all.
Yeah, just more generally speaking about the very fact that we were involved in this, I think says a lot. Sarah said it kind of talked through the process, and one of the things that happened is that I've been attending the board meetings, which is great as the sort of representative of the future leaders. But then what developed out of that is why not invite a small group of our members, of the young people, of the future leaders, to be involved in this process, so that then we had, I don't know, across the few sessions that we came to, what was it, 5 or 6, 7 different young people came along, or future leaders, I should say. And that meant that, they actively were involved, and just being involved in that process in itself was very valuable. That's the feedback we've had since. Most of them, including myself, hadn't been exposed to a board meeting before to see how these things function, and to be involved in these kind of more high level strategic conversations was really valuable. So just, going through the process in itself was like great experience, but then also, obviously speaking to that value in particular, and the fact that, there's this desire to make sure that talent is retained, and that we're creating a future for the industry where, people want to actually work in it. So yes, but yeah, I think you pretty much covered the meat and potatoes, Alice.
Cool.
What I'll do is I've got the one pager here, so I'll just share it briefly. So apologies, it's going crazy busy here. If you can hear the phone ring in the background. So this is just a template just for Ian and William and Betty and Jamie. You can see that. So as well as the teams were tasked with, as well as talking through the values and coming up with the wording for the values, fleshing that out in a bit more detail. And so, and these are the templates that we have for the 7 values. So there is quite a lot of thinking behind this that also points to content and case studies that we can look through. So here, and like I said, I think Manon was the originator of this, but I'm sure he'll say it was part of the creative process that was the exercise. It was very much around what's your superpower. That's the tagline, that's the hashtag. The medium phrase was encouraging employees and employers to develop their individuality and professional and personal aspirations. So very much focusing on developing people. And that's critical for retention and recruitment. You know, that the best companies in the world who do this really, really well, that's what they care about. They really care about their people. And they don't just say they care about their people, they actually do it. They know what those individuals need, and they understand how to move them through their organization in an effective way. And I think it's fascinating when we look at, a number of employee buyouts that are going on now, that option, especially in the UK, that's allowing employers to take ownership of companies as the transition happens from what was, the owner to a more leveled and broader ownership structure. I think that's a really interesting time that these two things are aligning. So let's just look at what this team and Tom and Alice, please chip in here, because you two particularly are involved in this. So the first blog post that you'll see about this, which will be coming out over the summer, will be the top 5 things that you can do to support your team. So these are just, again, 5 things that you can do relatively easily on a practical level that will help you encourage your team and build a team ethos in your business. Now, that's not going to work for everyone. These aren't a tick box exercise. It's not a form you have to fill in to send back to the MIA. We're not going down that route. This isn't the intention. It's just suggestions. But this centers on identify your team's superpower. What is it that every single person in that team brings that's really remarkable? For a lot of us, we employ highly creative individuals, often former musicians or current musicians. And that's really, really important for our businesses. So, but as well as that, what is their superpower? And finding that out and sharing it. Finding those common interests that aren't work related. I think we've all been through this very interesting period in our business cycles where, how many Zoom calls were, one of the great things about NAM for me was just to be able to sit down and talk face to face with so many people, try and avoid catching COVID, obviously. I know that didn't work for everyone, but for the most part, it's too easy to accept that Zoom and Teams is the norm now. And actually, especially in our industry, face-to-face communication is so important with our customers. Why, therefore, isn't it so important with our employees? And I know we're all operating different models now, and I've just appointed someone into a remote role, who's a huge talent that I probably wouldn't have been able to recruit if he had to come and sit in my office every day. So there's benefits of the new system, but how do we find those common interests across all of these people that we've got in our industries? Breaking down the hierarchies, so it's not about, and Tom, you've got a great example here that I'm going to make you talk about in terms of your cycling thing. So share that with us.
Yeah, sure. So going back a couple of years, we, a few people were sort of riding their bikes into work, and there was everyone from the managing director through to some people in the warehouse, and basically the point being that there was a sort of shared interest in cycling at various different levels, and that got people talking to one another, and then the idea was mooted about trying to do the coast to coast at some point, and just something that's kind of mixed across the whole organization, so that that everybody's involved and the hierarchy doesn't matter anymore, and you just kind of everyone's got a shared interest that's completely unwork related. And what was interesting was that actually the younger, fitter people that were in the warehouse were far more capable cyclists, let's say, than perhaps some of the people that sat in chairs all day long. But yeah, it was a nice example of a shared interest.
Yeah, and I think it was a great example when Tom explained it the first time of how you can immediately build relationships across the hierarchy of an organization around a common interest, you know. And isn't it great that the warehouse manager has got a hell of a lot better cycling experience than the MD, say, and can't that be a great way of building those networks and collaborations and just the ethos of a company? I think the other thing to say that's really important in this process, and certainly I found through the journey that is leadership, and it's definitely a journey. You never feel like you're any good at it. You hope that you're trying to be a good leader. Is that ability to show vulnerability? You know, talk about when we make mistakes, and we've, you know, as leaders we all make mistakes all the time. But showing that vulnerability to our team really will build trust. You know, and I know it's not easy to do that, and particularly in the music industry, traditionally, you know, these organizations have been structured in a very particular way, maybe with a very kind of strong leader at the top, and so showing vulnerability has been difficult. But in the modern way of thinking, often if you're going to build a team below you of young people who you want to take with you and hand that business over to one day, you've got to build that trust with them, and they've got to feel that you trust them as well. So that's just one example of a blog article that will be coming out. Top 5 things you can do to support your team on that one value. And the point here is that you'll start to see this content feeding out after the summer as we start to talk about this. And hopefully, to your point at the beginning, Ian, that will give, you know, there won't always be something that's relevant to you, but there'll certainly be some thinking and ideas there alongside case studies of, you know, and picking on the sustainability thing. You know, it's amazing now that we have, you know, a guy called Andy Land, who's head of sustainability at Focusrite. As far as I'm aware, the first senior appointment for a sustainable focus role in a music industry business. Doesn't surprise many of us, of course, that Focusrite are taking the lead on this. And as a PLC, no doubt that's to Greg's point earlier, you know, yes, the PLCs and yes, the venture cap businesses are being driven very much around a values-driven agenda, because that's the nature of the shareholding approach. But it's still fantastic for our industry to see that. And Andy's doing great work, I know, with Anthony and the MIA in terms of sharing the things that Focusrite are doing and how that can help our industry. Tom, I'm going to pick on Tom Farncombe a bit, because Tom, you're doing some fantastic stuff at Howard Leonard, which feeds into these values as well. Do you want to talk through one of the areas that Howard Leonard have been focused on and how that relates to, pick any of the values that you want? Again, there's another case study that we're going to be talking about.
I'd be delighted to. Fiona has a hand up there.
I apologise, Fiona.
Right, that's okay. I was just stepping back in case you had a flow there. I was just wanting to find out if we could explore a little bit more what William was saying about values, how the outside world values the music industry world, because I thought that was really pertinent. And I've been thinking, while still listening, oh my gosh, should we now have another value that is that? And then I thought, no, we've taken a year. Is there some way that we can be overt under each of the values about how that might look or how we might share with the outside world? Because there's quite a lot of how we're going to help our organizations, our members. But I just wondered if we could ask William a bit more about what he was thinking about with that, because that seems to make a lot of sense to me, particularly when you're talking about trillions in other in other sectors. We need to engage with the outside world as well.
Okay, are you looking me to? Sorry, are you looking to me to say a bit more? Well, I mean, it's driven by. We are, by our very natures, instrument makers are generally fairly small concerns. Obviously, our impact, because of what we make, is hugely wider, and it's that balance between the fact we're actually numerically very small and numerically very specialist. It's very interesting, some of the sort of recruitment techniques we've used to try and attract people. Basically, we need people who like making repetitively very small airfix kits. I'm afraid, you know, small airplanes and tanks that are this long. Actually, that's the skill that you need, and slightly introverted sometimes, people who can just sort of settle down their desk and do so. It was interesting, I went across to Fox in America some years ago, and their workshop looked exactly the same as ours in terms of people sitting at individual desks with their earphones on, doing their stuff, like they're, you know, absolutely concentrated, which is fascinating. It's just the same the world over.
So
yeah.
we sort of need something under each value that someone who's reading that thinks, ah, yes, that's how we can make some links outwards, because so often we in the music sector are the ones that have to build the bridges to other places, aren't we? So I think the values is another place where we could be thinking about, and therefore, even if we've done all of this, how can we feed that outwards? Someone under each value needs to be the one.
Yeah, there's a bit of a caveat in there, which is about the articulate, sort of the very articulate nature of what you're talking about. We're looking at vocational technical people. They aren't necessarily verbal and articulate. That's not wanted to diss them, but interestingly, we had an internal questionnaire that went round relatively recently, and we realized the way it's been phrased didn't fully understand how things tick in the workshop, or the type of people who are normal around the workshop, almost none of whom are graduates. And that immediately changes the way you writing clever questionnaires about where you've been to college doesn't, it's actually offensive. So there's very much a question of the type of people you need to fulfill that bottom level of making your instruments is a different sort of person you'd see in store. The repairer may be the crossover slightly, because they may be a musician as well, who's done some musical education, musical training. Yeah, it's that, and we need, as I say, we need very few people. Interestingly, we've just recruited 2 people, one of whom was a musician, been through college and the rest of it. Another one who'd been through, actually, he came to us through work experience some years ago. We've sort of kept in touch, and he's come from a completely different industry, so engineering side of things. But it's finding these individuals, and because what I was saying about, because we're so small numerically, finding a limited number of individuals. You haven't got a major marketing budget to say, hey world, we're here, do stuff. It's called, we need these very particular individuals who can actually have a major effect in terms of what they do, because our instruments will go so far.
That's great. Thanks, William. And I think Fiona, I'm glad you picked us up there, Fiona, because I think that ability to bridge the value outside of the industry is going to be important. That's a good reflective piece that we should look on as a group when we get back together and reflect on how we're doing. If it's okay, I'm going to go back to Tom, because again, I want to make sure that Ian and William in particular, and Jamie know that there's some tangibility to this. It's not just words. There is some thinking, and there are some great things happening in our industry already, which we're probably not shouting out enough about. So Tom, feed some of the things that Howland are doing.
And one is Stephen Wick, you had your hand up.
You carry on, Tom. I'll come back later. Yeah.
Well, I guess the history of how Leonard Europe only goes back as far as 2018, and this was the company was created following a major acquisition. So within global group, but the European presence was transformed 2018, and as a consequence, we realized that we had the opportunity, but possibly also there was a necessity to define what this new company was going to be. Overnight, the biggest printed music publisher in Europe. Suddenly a consolidation of rights. We went from, I think it was 8 people in the UK to almost 200 overnight. So there's a big sort of reset and an opportunity to kind of present ourselves, which meant trying to define what this new company stood for, what it meant in terms of the music making market, the music making community. And so we embarked upon an exercise in trying to define our vision, our mission, and also a set of value statements that would provide a reference point for how we go about what we do. And so we put our heads together. We collected staff feedback to find out what was important to them, and managed to summarize everything into some concise value statements. And those, I mean, we basically everything coalesced around music, that being our primary purpose. That, you know, and I think this is it's an important point that it's maybe a tangent to say that one of the challenges for our industry is that most people working in MI start as musicians, and they, for want of a better term, end up working in our industry rather than it being a driving passion that they've had from the start. And I think that is perhaps because we don't promote the opportunities in our industry enough. It's you know, there's not enough awareness of what you can do to have a rewarding career within this industry. But music is our primary purpose. It's, you know, we're a music company. We're not involved in creating anything that's non-musical. Then we had a second value around team, because we suddenly realized we had all these locations across Europe with multiple languages being spoken. We needed to, but we needed to operate as one group. And then, so that's the sort of internal piece. And then the third one was around community, making sure that we were part of the broader music making community, looking and also part of the communities that we serve as, I mean, for instance, in Bury St Edmunds, we're a major employer and in not a huge city, and that's where our UK distribution centre is. So there's responsibility there to be looking at how we can serve that community. And then in terms of the broader music making market, how do we interact with music makers, organizations, associations, charities, etc. And then the final value was around success, which is part of, I think, the ethos of the global company is not being reticent to talk about our success and ambition and so on. So we had managed to define those values round about the time of the murder of George Floyd, and which was the catalyst for obviously huge reaction and action across globally, but within the music industry, there was a particular reaction. And we quickly realized that our value statements, especially around community, wouldn't mean very much if we weren't also considering the how we related to the sort of the topics of diversity, equity, social justice, equality, inclusion, however you want to label it. We needed to be part of that conversation and be reflecting upon what we could do, what we should be doing. And so as an extension of the values piece, we started considering what ED&I means to us. I would say this increasing reticence, because it feels like topics which are fundamentally around social justice get sort of compromised by buzzwords, by kind of just which change and evolve, and so the terminology almost becomes meaningless. But the point is that we have a duty, a responsibility, and an opportunity to act to make sure that we are serving as broad and as diverse a community of customers and music makers as we can. So that led to considering what our actions were going to be. We're very conscious of the sort of performative gestures, which, with all respect, were made by many record companies, music publishers, and other organizations involved in music and music education, black squares on Twitter, solemn statements, and an instant backlash, because it doesn't take long to point at a particular syllabus, shall we say, or the actions and the way that, for instance, many big music rights holders have treated their back catalogue and their artists and writers, which is being put right now to a certain extent. But we're very conscious of making sure that anything we did was going to be long-term, would be substantial, and was not just a sort of knee-jerk and tick box reaction in the moment. So we've embarked upon some processes and putting some things in place to make sure that ED&I would be a substantial part of our thinking and would guide our company's strategic approach. The first thing to realize was that we didn't know anything about this, or didn't know enough to be able to form our plans in a convincing fashion. So the first outcome was to find people to join us in an external advisory capacity, which is, partly by solid research and excellent word of mouth recommendations from some of our peers, and also advice from those organizations we already work with, such as Youth Music. We were able to assemble an excellent group of people. There's an element of luck in there as well in terms of the way that group gelled, but it gave us a huge amount of input, advice, inspiration, ideas. The practical application of that was an internal audit, which is actually still going on. This is not, and it's we've quickly learned that this is a process. It's a journey, not a destination. And so, but the first parts of that audit were to do with staff surveys, data collection, understanding our people and what's important to them, all driving towards trying to create an inclusive culture where we will eventually, I hope, be able to point to Howell Learners Europe and be able to say that this is a great place to work. You are welcome here, whoever you are, wherever you've come from, and we will very much value all of the strengths that can come from a diverse range of viewpoints.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Yeah,
I could go on, but I will not.
No, that's fantastic. So I think what we're seeing here, and just to I'm conscious of the fact that I want to give you all 5 minutes back because my little gift to you on a Friday is that the bigger companies, particularly, not all of them, but some of them are already going on this journey. And Greg mentioned this at the start with with the example that he used. So how do we disseminate this? Because we know in our industry, to William's point, we're not just big companies. This isn't flooded with massive corporations. We're lots of small and medium and micro businesses as well, and they need help as well. Anthony uses a fantastic phrase, which I really always enjoy, which is, you've got to go through complicated to get to simple. So this is complicated stuff. But I think the strategic shift from the MIA's perspective is that we want to go from being a reactive organization, i.e. Brexit's happening, how do I help, how do I help my Brexit problem, or COVID's happening, or I can't do this. So yes, we're going to keep doing that and be supportive as much as we can, but we want to be proactive, i.e. trying to get the industry and certainly our smaller companies that really need the help, but also our bigger companies in terms of validation of those values works that they'll be doing, to say, these are the things that we need to be thinking about in the next 5 to 10 years, because 5 to 10 years isn't a long way away, especially in our industry where we operate at a glacially slow speed in reality. So to change ethos, mindset, to show a proactive future that is positive, aspirational, engaging, that's what the purpose of this activity is. And, we're very excited about it. We know that there's a lot of thinking, and Fiona's just identified there's some more work to do. We really appreciate William, Jamie, Ian, your feedback. And what we'd ask you to do, all we ask you to do at this point is talk about this with your colleagues, within your businesses, share the post, just have a conversation about it and come back to us and say, yeah, we like, this is great, but we're not so sure about this one, or the one that really matters to us is this one. It sounds like maybe, William, you're particularly interested in how we're going to recruit and retain really good people. Maybe, Ian, your focus is going to be on, I'm going to have to be sourcing sustainable products in the future, and how am I going to do that? Because I know that the demand's going to be there. So, there's always going to be one or two that particularly resonate with our own individual businesses. And I think it's identifying those and finding a way to share your journey and tell us the help that you need. So has anyone else got anything that they want to share?
Just a quickie good news story to insert. The BBC article very late yesterday about the big noise in Scotland, in Stirling, which is the Scottish version of El Sistema. Just really good news story. Go and have a look. If you haven't seen it already, go hunt it. Don't shout about it. It's really good.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Olivia.
Morning. I just wanted to say that it was a really enjoyable experience, but what was great was that there was an abundance of conversation. At no point over the process where we all sat around a table going, don't know what to say about this. And there was such an abundance of good case studies that people are already doing. So it kind of gives everybody else the confidence that it's actually doable and it's not something that's unattainable. So that was really positive for me.
Thanks, Olivia.
Can I just say, as an outsider, it's been a very encouraging morning in terms of looking at all this and where the MIA is going. You know, I think it's obviously been on a journey of transformation in the last couple of years. I only got involved really in more depth a couple of years ago, and I've seen a lot of that transformation. So, and this is a great step, you know, and I suppose I come away looking at how I got into the industry when I was 21 and knew nothing, and going, okay, you know, with everybody on the call today and other people with great experience in the industry, where are the mentors for the next generations? I had thankfully 2 great mentors when I came into the industry, and you know, one of them's still alive, one isn't, but they were incredibly helpful for a guy that knew nothing about nothing apart from playing guitar. You know, so I'd love, you know, to go, okay, on this call, you know, how can we help the next generation? What can we do to really be mentors to the next group of people that are going to take our place?
That's a great sum up, Ian. Thank you so much for saying that. And we may be a small industry, but boy, do we have a massive impact in the world. And, you know, I think we all know and we love this industry. That's why we're here and we want to be part of it. And we're going to keep talking about this. And the other thing that I found in those conversations that I've been having on one-to-ones particularly is no one is telling me, no matter, I mean, you can go right to the biggest organizations in the UK to the smallest ones. No one is saying that they shouldn't be thinking about these things. It's about creating the headspace and the time and the ability to just, how do I eke out 5% of my week, 10% of my week to think about sustainability or think about how I'm going to be better at retaining staff, and those are the things that we're going to try and help with. Just simple steps to get us on this journey so that in 10 years time, we look back and go, you know what, this is an industry we're really proud of. We really love being, and to your point, Ian, we can hand over to the next generation and give them that wonderful experience to build upon. So on that point, I've only given you 2 minutes. I apologize, but you all get 2 minutes back. Have a lovely weekend. I hope the weather picks up, particularly in Northern Ireland. And it's great to see you all.